yeah. So I just made a quick list off the top of my head of the shows you've worked on that come to mind. The Handmaid's Tale, Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, Barry, and Dead to Me, which are all huge shows.
I would not include Dead to Me, although my company does it, but really the credit goes to my partner, Sherry Thomas, and my other casting director, Russell Scott. They're the main people on that, so, I always give credit where credit is due. Another one is Better Call Saul. We also we didn't come in till season 3, but Fear the Walking Dead, so we are in the Walking Dead universe. Did a show for Netflix called The Society with a lot of young people. The television limited series The Act with Joey King and Patricia Arquette, something I'm very proud of. And even smaller shows that I'm as proud of as the successful ones. Halt and Catch Fire on AMC, which is a small but critically acclaimed show. The Last Tycoon, and probably one of my favorites was a show called The Unit for CBS. I really loved working on that show.
Cool. That's amazing. So let's start from the beginning, and then we'll work back up to talking about some of these shows. So remind me, how did you first get started, or what was your first job?
I started my career in commercial casting. I was working at a acting studio called Professional Artist Group, and during the day they cast commercials, and I was on scholarship there, bringing people in. They were the first school that had casting directors, and directors teach classes. So during the day I met all the commercial casting directors, and I thought I just loved seeing all the actors coming in and out. And one day I remember said, I can do that. I think I want to do that. And a casting director, who will not be named, I went up to her and said, I think I'd like to do this. I'd be good at it. And she looked at me and she laughed and she said, ha, that'll never happen. And that was all I needed to motivate me. So I started by actually assisting 3 or 4 different casting directors in commercials, which is unusual. Usually you apprentice under one, but I did 3 or 4, which I thought was a really wonderful thing so that I could learn their aesthetic as well. And then I fibbed a little when I answered the phone one day, and they were looking for a casting director for an industrial film, and I said I was a casting director, so they hired me. And after that, things started rolling, and then I moved into feature films because I got a call from someone who was looking for an assistant, and she said, do you want to work for me as an assistant for $200 part-time a week? And at that time, I was already, making a good living, and I was like, I don't think I can do that. And I thought, let me call you back tomorrow, because creatively, I was not that fulfilled. Because back then when you were casting commercials, it was 30 to 40 white guys, and you could not go outside of what specifically they were looking for. It was great because I learned so much talent, but it wasn't good for thinking outside the box, let's say. So I got a call I called the woman back who asked if I wanted to be her assistant, and I said, if you pay me $250 a week, I'll come full time. And she said yes, and that movie was Blue Velvet by David Lynch, and I was the casting assistant, the girl out front on that movie.
Wow. So it sounds to me like chutzpah is kind of the trait that got you started.
Well, I think that was one of them, and ambition is probably the other one, but also really hard, a work ethic. I worked really hard all the time, and I still do. So my feeling is, even as in Hollywood, as you become more and more successful, it takes even more work to stay on top of your game. So I think it's the combination of a really hard work ethic and also understanding people and then understanding yourself. I was not going to have somebody tell me I couldn't do something.
Gotcha. Why were you drawn to the idea of being a casting director?
I had studied acting and dance in college. I sort of thought of becoming an actress, but honestly, I really wanted to be the choreographer for the national gymnastics team. But I came out to LA thinking of dabbling in it and realized I didn't want to do anything that I wasn't going to be really good at. And I looked around and saw how skilled the actors were and didn't think that I would stand out. So the casting kind of fell into place because I was working at, that place, Professional Artist Group, and it combined a lot of what I love, which is acting, reading. I love to read, and as a casting director, you have to read a lot of scripts, and I love reading. And I love working with talent, because talent has always turned me on, and talent in every area, not just the actors, but the directors and the writers. And I had an extraordinary memory, almost a photographic memory, and I was able to remember so many actors' names and faces. They used to have a book called the Academy Players Directory, and that was sort of like the Bible that you were looking at, and I used to remember where people's pictures were on the page, and that's how I would remember them and who their agent was. It's different every day. There's some of the same skills, but each job is really different, and you're working with different people. So I think that is something I was drawn to because I did not want to get bored at work.
Boy, I'm learning so much about you I didn't know. So what is the first thing you do when you start a job?
The first thing I do when I get a job, I've already read the script because I have to read the script unless somebody offers me a job, which happens now. But I have to read a script, and often if it's somebody new, go in and meet with them, and I'm auditioning myself. You really kind of think of people for the different roles, and you discuss that with the creators, and you get a sense of their aesthetic, and they get a sense of mine. Then after you get the job, you start with ideas of different people for different roles, checking on their availabilities. And if it's a big star, it would be an offer. But for everybody else, the working actors, what we do is put out something called the breakdown that goes out to the breakdown services that goes out to all the agents. It can be all over the world, all over the country. It could be just in New York, just in California. You pick where it goes. And then from that, you'll get thousands of submissions, and you kind of comb through those submissions along with your own ideas, and then conversations with agents, conversations with your showrunner, and from there you start auditioning actors. And they come in and they read, and then there are often callbacks depending on the role. In a weekly television series, for instance, once it's up and running, there really are no callbacks. It's usually just the first, you're just auditioning actors. And then the last part of my job is negotiating the contracts with the agents. Unless it's a series regular role, then the business affairs from your studio negotiates the deal with the agent or the lawyer. But Sherry Thomas and I, we get very involved with that stage in order to make sure the deal closes, because it is my job to make the showrunner happy and get them the choice that they want, and I don't want it to fall apart during negotiations. So many casting directors don't do that, but we get very involved so that when we can see something's going to fall apart, we can jump in there and make sure it doesn't go away, especially if that's who you want.
Okay. For a second, I was thinking that maybe somehow you got a commission depending on who gets, but you get a flat rate, right? And
no,
we don't have to talk about this at all.
But casting directors are paid by the job. They don't make any money off an actor. They don't take a percentage of an actor. It's a misconception. Agents take a commission on an actor. Casting directors are paid a fee for their service for the job. So I don't make any money if one actor gets it over another actor. I don't make any more money by pushing an actor.
Gotcha. Okay. And who makes the final decision about whether someone is hired?
It depends on the medium. In the feature films, it's the director. In television, it's the producer or showrunner, the writer-producer. And it also has to be approved by the studio and the network. But, the more they respect and trust the showrunner, the more they will have the final say. In other words, I'll use an example like Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould on Better Call Saul. The studio and the network have a lot of respect for them. They have a big track record. They don't really tell them what to do, but they do approve everything. And throughout the years, there was maybe 2 actors they didn't approve, and one of them they were right about, I think. And I think Vince would say the same thing. And then it works the same way with the director or the producer that I'm working with. I have a lot of say when it's someone who really trusts me and trusts the process of casting. And there are those clients I have that just are hiring you to provide the service of bringing actors to them, and they want to make a decision often without your expertise, which is interesting because the most successful people rely on the people who work with them. And, they rely on the cameraman to tell them about the shots, or the DP to tell them about the lighting, and the costume designer to advise them. And the best directors and producers, and the most successful I've worked with, really rely on our input and expertise, because we see it all day long, every day. They may just be seeing it on their first movie or their first television show, or, they've done a couple. But remember, I work in an office with a lot, other casting directors. So I'm seeing so many actors come in all the time, and you really get to understand the breadth of an actor's work. So an actor can come in and do a pretty bad audition, and you can fight for them because you can say to them, oh, you should see them in this role. I've seen them on stage do this. Yes, they have that quality. They just didn't do it today.
Right. That's interesting. So is it only just the way they perform or the way they act, or are other things taken into consideration, like their reputation for being cooperative or not cooperative? I mean, is that part of it?
Yes, it is, depending on the show and depending on the level of stardom. I can tell you that on The Walking Dead, we promised an asshole-free set, and we delivered. All those years, because we knew people were going to be out in the heat, and it was not going to be an easy job, and they're going to be hot, and they're going to running in the summer in Georgia with mosquitoes and costumes, etc. And their work ethic is just as important in their getting hired and their reputation as is how they perform. And I think that's on a lot of different shows. When we are casting the lead in a television show, it's called the number one on the call sheet because their name is first. We do a lot of research on that actor and what they've been like, because somebody who doesn't behave can tank a show. And you're talking about millions and millions of dollars at stake. So it's an important, I feel it's my job to protect the studio and the network and the creator to find them someone who can be a leader. There's a list of people who life is too short.
It's not worth hiring them, even if they have a great name.
Correct. Because if they tank the show, then it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting, because when I worked on Donahue, I worked with a huge celebrity. I don't know if I want to say his name, but he had a very bad addiction problem, and it turns out he missed a flight, and he was a real problem. But when I talked to his agent, he laughed and said, yes, that's the way he is in his regular life, but he's never been late to set, and he's never missed a reading, and he's never missed anything. You're taking a risk because this is a person, and I guess you just never know how it's going to work out with them.
Well, and there are certain celebrities who have
a
reputation for being a functioning alcoholic, and they do just fine. So, you just have to know, you have to see their past behavior. Hollywood is the one industry that's very willing to forgive addiction when someone has repented. You can use the example of Robert Downey Jr., who was so messed up with his addiction that he was found sleeping in somebody else's house. And he got sober, and, he was so talented that once he got sober, he was able to totally redo his career and become a huge, mega international movie star. So it is a forgiving industry, in my opinion.
Yeah. Good point. Is it important at all to you personally to find actors who are unknown, or is it just celebrities that you're after, or is it a mix, or how does that work?
It's a mix, and it's very important to me to give talented unknown actors a shot, and I take a great amount of pride in my career having done so, as does my office. I think Sherry and I have had a huge impact on the younger casting directors who work for us, and there's nothing as exciting for a casting director as discovering talent and giving them their first break. Jeff Daniels is an amazingly talented actor, and it's incredible to see him in every show, and you're proud if he's in your show. But it's not like giving a younger, not always young, an actor their first break in a really huge part. Or finding an actor to do something that they're not known for, because we are a business that typecasts people. So I find it very exciting to take an actor who's, for instance, only known for comedy and put them in a dramatic role. And I think, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul are two of the best examples of that. Because if you look closely at the cast of Breaking Bad, there are a lot of comedians there. And I guess that's where the chutzpah comes in, because Sherry and I were trying to get a comedy, and we could not get a comedy. We met with network heads and development people, and, we were doing all this hip, cool, dark dramas, and they wouldn't give us a comedy. So my revenge was putting comedians into Breaking Bad. That's when it's exciting to really show people that actors who have a wide range of a talent are the ones that do, and to be able to explore that and put them somewhere else. And obviously we've done a lot of comedy since. Sherry Thomas, my partner, would say that it was really Danny McBride that gave us our shot. And ever since he hired us on Vice Principals, we've been getting a lot of great comedies. But he's the one who gave us our shot.
Do you tend to work with people often, like the same people hire you back kind of thing?
Yes. It's joyful. There's nothing like loyalty, and it means a lot, and it goes both ways. I've worked with Billy Ray a lot. He's a writer-director. The James Comey movie on Showtime, the fourth time I've worked with Billy Ray. Obviously, I've been working with Vince Gilligan for 12 years, from Breaking Bad to Better Call Saul to the El Camino movie on Netflix. And there are others that are, we've worked with Danny McBride twice since the first one. So it means a lot to us when people come back. Sean Ryan, we've worked with multiple times. David Mamet, who's taught me everything there is to know about loyalty.
I was reading last night that Aaron Paul won 3. I didn't realize he won 3 outstanding supporting actor Emmys for Breaking Bad. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he wasn't that well known beforehand, was he? How did that come?
Not at all. Not at all. That came through the actual casting process of an agent pitching an actor. We actually thought he was too old, but thought, okay, let's try it. And his agent really said, give him a chance, give him a chance. Sherry and I already liked him. He'd come in and auditioned before, and it was a process. He came in, he read, he called back, he tested at the network, and he got the part. There are a lot of other actors we had auditioned as well that are really talented, but he was just the guy. And he was supposed to die in the middle of the first season, but from the pilot, Vince saw the chemistry that the two of them had, and the show kind of shifted around that. I think Anna Gunn was, I know she won, but I don't know. I think she was nominated multiple times as well. And Brian also won 3 times. But Brian was well known.
Right.
But as a comedian, he was well known for Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, right. So he was a comedian. He was a comedic actor pretty much at that point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
The way it actually happened was we were casting. I do a lot of theater, and I come from the theater, and that's one of my first loves. And when I started in theatrical casting, it was theater and film, which is what I was doing. So I was casting for La Jolla Playhouse for probably 10 years under Des McAnuff, and he came in to audition, because back then and still actors have to audition in the theater. And it was the new Aaron Sorkin play, The Farnsworth Invention, and he came in and he read and literally blew us away. He didn't get the role, but his ability with language, you could see how intelligent he was. Aaron Sorkin's material is not easy. You have to really be able to handle the dialogue, and I just couldn't believe it, that he was the real deal. So when Sherry and I met with Vince Gilligan, we said, you might think we're crazy, but what about Bryan Cranston? And Vince said, oh my God, that's who I want. And we're like, you're kidding. And Vince had written an episode of The X-Files that Brian had once done, and he also felt the same, that he was an extraordinary actor that people didn't know was an extraordinary actor. So that's how that came about. And it was not easy convincing the studio and the network. And to their credit, they went with it.
Nice. Is there anything more about Breaking Bad you want to say?
I mean, it's changed my career. I'm grateful for it. It taught me so much about casting because of Vince's aesthetic and the realism in it. And that is a perfect example of non-celebrity casting, of the success of a show. And to me, one of the most iconic shows in the history of television that did not rely on celebrity casting. In fact, we went the other way. And the people, television is a medium that can make stars, and the medium of Breaking Bad really did create careers for people. That's why when they say, do you cast celebrities all the time? I say, look at the cast of Breaking Bad. I mean, nobody knew who they were, or they were actors you hadn't heard of in 20 years, like Jonathan Banks, who had, been on Wise Guy, but just had been a, journeyman actor.
I'm just so curious because I remember when the first episode was about to air, I remember you calling me and telling me that it was going to be amazing. What was it about it that was you were so sure?
It was the best.
You've never done that before.
I know. Well, it was the best, to me, it was the best pilot I've ever read, still to this date. Maybe Handmaid's Tale is a close second. But the writing was so superb, and I was so impressed with the artistic integrity of Vince that I just knew. And, we weren't a hit the first year, and our first season came during the writer's strike, so we only did 6 episodes. And if you notice later on in years, Vince Gilligan used to thank Netflix because it was only when Netflix started airing the first 2 seasons that people knew what it was and it became so popular. Many people come to Breaking Bad really late, and I still get letters from people. Sir Anthony Hopkins wrote a letter to Bryan Cranston, like a love letter, that it was the best thing on television and the best cast. And, he said, I wasted an entire week sitting home and just watching the whole thing, and it was not a waste. Yeah. So I think it was extraordinary writing.
Okay. Now tell me about Handmaid's Tale. It just gives me chills when I just say the name.
Well,
tell me what it's like for you.
Again, the original script, the pilot, was so strong. And, Sherry and I were just so drawn to it. And I think it came at a time when we really wanted our work to be meaningful and to work on something that was meaningful. And it's still so meaningful that it just kind of, it takes it to a whole nother level, and you infuse that feeling when you're working on it. Each role becomes very, very important because it has to resonate with an audience, and it's scary. I mean, I loved the book. I had read the book. I thought it was great. And I did not cast Elizabeth Moss. She came with the show. In other words, she greenlit the show. So that was kind of, you had to cast actors who could hold their own around her because she's an extraordinary actress. And again, I think Bruce, our showrunner, took a lot of chances on people who, were not that well known. And when you start a show with the beginning of a new studio, like Hulu was new, you get, in my opinion, a lot more leeway than when you go somewhere where they've been doing it for a long time and have their way of doing it. That a lot of the cable networks believe once you hire someone, support them. And sometimes certain networks just want everything to look their way. I cried during some of those auditions. It was heartbreaking. So it just was, we knew how meaningful it was. You never know what's going to happen. But if it touches that much of a chord in you while you're casting, you have a sense of possible success. I think that happened to us in Breaking Bad. It happened to me when I cast the musical Jersey Boys. You just knew you were in the presence of something special.
Is there a well-known celebrity who was completely unknown when you casted him or her the first time?
Yeah, I mean, she gets recognition for her first big movie, but truth be told, we cast Margot Robbie in a television series called Pan Am. Nobody in America knew who she was. That was her first job. But all the press just focuses on her first movie. So that's exciting. There's a lot of people who I would say who have careers, but I think that's like a huge celebrity, Angie Harmon was already working, but I was nursing. So I was up in the middle of the night watching Baywatch Nights, which is a tiny little show. It wasn't a big hit. and cast her in a television series that didn't last long called C-16. And from that, I think her career took off in a big way, which was exciting. There's quite a few others.
All right. I'll let you go.
All right. I love you, Amy.
I love you too. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.